There's a lot of talk about the relationship between painting and language. It's a relationship I believe in. However, it seems that a lot of contemporary painting relies on language to exist. This I disagree with. Language requires a consensus, an agreement between the author and the reader on the meaning of the words. And the last thing painting needs is a consensus. We are not storytellers, but image makers. We have to put the past, present, and future into a single fixed view. If you put any noun next to any verb, you've got a sentence. It cannot fail. If you change the order, you change the meaning of the words, but it is still a sentence. As my favorite comedian, George Carlin, said, you can prick your finger, but you don't want to finger your prick. You can translate those words into 100 other languages and still say essentially the same thing, because language is connected to other known languages, whereas painting is connected only to the painter. A painting cannot be translated because it is the physical presentment of its subject. It is a thing. And as a maker of things, I am obsessed with touch. Everything has to be suspended on the tip of the brush. Touch counts. Every single brushstroke is the last of its kind. And I believe that there is a finite number of brushstrokes in this world, and as soon as one is used, it's gone forever. So that a painting is as much a comment on disappearance as it is appearance. I travel a lot around the country doing visiting artist gigs, and I meet a lot of new or less experienced painters. And the two most common mistakes I see are they're afraid to leave the brushstroke alone, and they don't use enough paint. They put down a mark and then monkey with it, killing it dead. Put a brushstroke down and then clasp your fingers behind your back and step away from the painting. And also use a lot of paint. It's better to buy cheap paint and use gobs of it than to peck around at little crumbs of color on a palette. In the old days when I couldn't afford nice paint, I would buy the cheapest house paint I could find and then add thickening agents to it to make it stiffer and more consistent. So if you put any noun next to any verb, you've got a sentence. But if you put two colors side by side, you do not have a painting, because it requires the primacy of human touch. And as William Carlos Williams said, and I love this, no ideas, but in things. I read a good deal of poetry, and I'm obsessed with the odes of John Keats. And I've worn out many copies over the years. It's kind of a user's manual for my life as a painter. And the one I love the most is Ode on a Grecian Urn. And what it's taught me is that a painting is a static, lifeless object. It is a thing outside of ourselves to which we bring ourselves. Our intellect, our bodies, we project our vitality onto this lifeless thing. Thou still unravished bride of quietness, as Keats writes. And whatever the imagery is on the urn as you walk around it, as he implies, never changes. It doesn't tell a story. It is the physical presentment of its subject. It is eternally immediate. So it can't be about narrative. I don't think a painting can be narrative because we don't know what it was like before, nor can we anticipate what it will be like later. Just as it can't be about memory. Certainly you can reach into memory to make images, but the painting itself cannot be memory. It can only be eternally immediate. And as an image maker, one of the great revelations of my career, it took me 30 years to realize it, was the enormous power in the fixed static viewpoint, in the image. And sometimes the most beautiful damn things are those which have been there all along. And if you study those who do it better, Henri Fantin-Latour or Wolf Kahn, they masterfully construct a static image. And that's plenty. It's a waste of time to try to make painting do what language or film can do better. A painting can do what words can never do, and that is give us the physical presentment of the subject. So we fade and the image endures. It goes on and on. When old age shall this generation waste, thou shalt remain, as Keats goes on to write. I find it so beautiful that art fails us. It always lets us down. The painting that I see in my mind is never what I end up putting on canvas. What I put down never is as good as what I think about or see in my mind. And I love that. Art comes to us bearing absolutely nothing. And I think trying to force it to do everything, to edify and educate and memorialize and protest, simply weakens what it can do best. And that is fill our remaining moments on this earth with the highest quality. That's enough. That's plenty for me. So I think that art is incomplete, and we compensate by giving it our vitality. And in return, it compensates for the impermanence of life. I don't use thick paint because I like the way it looks. I don't. I use thick paint because I want to craft a place and discover it at the same time. I paint the landscape in the same way I learned how to see it, by lying on my belly, my face in the dirt, the foreground pressed right up underneath my chin. That's the way I understand the world. It was Emile Bernard who said, you have to simplify the spectacle in order to make sense of it. You have to, in a way, draw its plan. So what I'm doing in my paintings is not painting the landscape, but rather its plan. And that's the reason I don't use preparatory drawings, because I want there to be a built-in slowness and clumsiness along the way. It's like when a novelist says they composed an entire novel in longhand with a ballpoint pen on a yellow ledger. There's a reason they do that, because it forces a sense of slowness. I want to spend a long time on these things. Why would I want anything this important to me to be done as quickly and rapidly as possible? All I have as a painter is foreground, middle ground, and background. Those are the walls which I have to push up against. And I have to create a sense of spaciousness and light frozen within a static snapshot. Those are my limitations. And I find that every time I come back to the painting, I'm a different artist. And indeed, it was Heraclitus who said, a man or a woman cannot step into the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and it is not the same man or woman. I find that every time I touch the painting, it has to count. Touch is everything. The moment the paint, the tip of the brush, kisses the weave of the canvas, everything changes in the painting. That brushstroke is obliterated off the face of the earth forever and ever, never to be repeated. So make each single one count. And I find that you have to live and love and lose in order to have content on the tip of the brush. There are no shortcuts. Flight hours really count. Back in the early 90s, I was having a solo exhibition at St. John's Museum of Art in beautiful Wilmington, North Carolina, which is now the Cameron Museum of Art. And they were flying me down for the opening reception and to give a slide talk. And it was cold season here in New York City, and I remember boarding my flight at LaGuardia, taking a swig of an over-the-counter cold medication, chased by a couple of air sickness pills, because I hate to fly. And during the flight, about 45 minutes later, that cocktail produced a deadly chemical reaction in which my muscles contracted and froze. I began frothing at the mouth, and my eyes rolled back in my head, and I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to stop breathing. Fortunately, a very wise captain and a decisive flight attendant emergency landed a full Boeing 737 in Norfolk, Virginia. And a couple of Marines on board took me off, like Keith Richards, down to an ambulance waiting right there on the tarmac, full cherry top, to rush me to the hospital to have my stomach pumped. And a few hours later, I was strong enough to sit up in bed and work on some tree drawings, which I had in my luggage, which prompted a discussion with my doctor, who was friends with a local curator, thus resulting in another solo show several years later. My point is, talk to everyone you can all the time about your work. Learn to speak about what it is you're doing articulately and with enthusiasm. You never know who you're speaking to, and you never know when the right person is going to come along and take you to the next level. Plant seeds now that may be harvested much, much later. Here's a photograph of me after I finally did make it to my opening, and I think I look like a nauseous Greek waiter.